This is the first episode in what will be a well, actually a series, hopefully, of history stories that are interesting, cool, or provide some insight. I believe that this is one of the most fun places to start when learning about history. Not this story, but learning about the cool stories, at least. So today we will be going over this story of Witold Pilecki, otherwise known as Inmate 4859. Inmate 4859, or Witold Pilecki, was a soldier in the Polish army during World War II. Soldier's an understatement. I can't remember if he was a general or he was in charge. And whenever Germany invaded in 1939, he was, of course, called to action, and he fought as hard as he could with his men until, Poland fell. Then, as Poland fell, concentration camps began rising up, one by one. And one of these camps is what we know today as Auschwitz, or Clausewitz. At the time, though, the Allies, such as Britain and France, they did not believe that Auschwitz exists. They thought, how could a horrendous place that these Poles are telling us, how could this exist? So they wrote it off as a myth. They said, oh, the Poles are scared, so they're making this bigger than it has to be. So they didn't pay much mind to it. While the Polish government in exile in Britain, they knew that this was real. They knew that it existed. Hundreds of their men, women, and children had been sent to it to die. So then one man decided he was going to go to Auschwitz and prove it was real. This man was Witold Pilecki. He decided to prove to the Allies that Auschwitz existed, that he would get fake documents and papers that say that he is a Jew in Poland. Those are two very bad things in German occupation in World War II. And he got papers saying he was both, which he was Polish. And he basically let himself get caught. He wandered the street till he got caught, and he did. And whenever he was taken, they took him to Auschwitz, which is where he was hoping to be taken. This was a big risk, because if it had gone wrong, he wouldn't have gone to Auschwitz. He would have gone to many of the numerous other death camps. Granted, they wouldn't be as bad as Auschwitz, probably. They were still pretty bad. But he would fail in his goal, which was to prove that Auschwitz existed. So he went to Auschwitz, and he decided to try and send messages to these governments, such as the government in exile in Britain. Well, these messages, they did go through, but they basically went unheard. They thought the Poles are trying to trick us just so that they will get more help, so we're going to ignore it. So no help came from the government in exile or the Allies. So he decided, okay, if they're not going to believe me while I'm in here, then I guess I'm just going to have to break out. So he attempted for 3 times. 3 times he tried to break out, and the first 2 he was, of course, caught and returned, and he was, of course, punished severely for it. He also led several prisoner uprisings during these attempted escapes, which most of them failed, except for the 3rd one, which he was allowed to escape, and that was in 1943, if I believe correctly. 43 or 44. I do not have a script for this. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. He escaped, and then most people would, at this point, just go back to living in their normal homes. They would just go back to try and live comfortably. They've seen horrendous things. They don't want any more of this war. He didn't want to. He decided, I'm going to help my country. And he went back to fighting. And he fought until Poland was liberated by the Soviets in 1945. When Poland was liberated and Poland came under Soviet control as a puppet, or a satellite state, if you want to be politically correct, the Soviets saw what he was capable of. They saw what he did. And they saw him as a threat. And to be fair, he was. He did not want to be a part of the communist agenda or the Soviet agenda. He wanted to be free. He wanted Poland to be free. He wanted it to be his own country, not controlled by a bigger one, with a bigger army. So, he did start speaking out against this. And of course, he was a military official, so he was taken seriously to an extent. So the Soviet government in place decided, we need to get rid of this guy. They framed him for treason and sentenced him to death. Right before his execution, his last words were, "Long live Poland." And this story was not truly discovered by the countries in the West, or widespread at least, until after the Soviet collapse, because they kept many of these stories under wraps because they didn't want the outside world knowing what was happening. So that is the story, the solemn one, of inmate 4859. Thank you for watching. See ya.